The snow kept falling as if the sky itself was trying to erase every trace of the world beneath it. The wind howled through the bare branches, sweeping across the white fields like a never-ending song of cold and silence. This was a remote countryside in the northern United States where winter came without warning and never left without a fight. Amid this stark landscape near an old abandoned train station, weathered by time, a small dark figure moved quietly through the thick snow. It was a mixed-breed dog, no collar, no name, no home to return to. His fur, once a pale ivory, was now matted with dirt and stiff from frost. His ears drooped low, partly from the cold, partly from the fear etched deep into his memory. He was thin, almost skeletal, with scars scattered across his body like a map of the painful days he'd wandered alone. Each step he took was careful, deliberate, as though the snow beneath him might betray him too. Once he had a name, though now he couldn't recall it. A homeless man had once called him Rag, just because his fur had looked like a torn rag. The day they met behind the town's landfill, they had lived together through 2 brutal winters. The older man, despite having so little, always shared half of whatever food he could find with Rag, and on the coldest nights they curled up under a patchwork blanket, 2 forgotten souls finding warmth in each other. But last winter the man didn't wake up. As dawn broke through gray clouds, Rag licked the cold hand of his companion for hours. He waited and waited until uniformed men arrived. They took the older man away on a stretcher, covered in a green tarp. No one looked at Rag. No one asked anything. He wasn't allowed to go. From that day on, he never approached another human again. Since then, Rag has stayed close to the landfill and the old station. No one came out this far, too remote, too cold. Occasionally, someone might glimpse him from a distance, just a dark blur moving behind a curtain of snow, eyes glowing gold before disappearing again. Sometimes someone left a scrap of bread. Rag rarely took it. He no longer trusted sudden kindness. The wind screamed through the station's rotting wooden slats. Rag crawled beneath the floorboards where he had built a makeshift nest from discarded rags and crumpled newspaper. Tonight was colder than usual. The snow had not stopped since late afternoon, and the sky showed no sign of mercy. The air was heavy, pressing down like the weight of a coming collapse. He curled into himself, tail tucked, body shivering, and then his ears twitched, a sound, faint, not wind. Rag lifted his head, listened. The snow muffled everything. But then again that sound, soft, thin, strained, not a don, not a cat, a child's cry. He wriggled out from his hiding place. The icy wind stung his face. He lifted his nose, sniffing at the air. The sound was coming from behind the station, where a broken fence marked a narrow path leading into the woods. No one went that way, especially not when the snow buried everything. Still Rag moved. The snow reached his chest. Every step made the crust crack beneath him. The wind pushed against his back, but the crying continued. Weak, scattered like whoever it was, might stop any moment now. Rag slipped through the broken fence. The sharp scent of snow and rotting wood filled his nose. He circled behind the station, past crumbled bricks and rusted beams. The crying grew clearer. He pressed forward, sniffing rapidly, and then he saw it. A plastic basket half buried in snow. Lightly covered by a navy blue coat, inside a tiny figure stirred a baby, wearing a woolen cap, face flushed red, lips tinged blue. Small fists curled tightly from the cold. A newborn Rag froze. He had never seen a creature so fragile. The coat was soaked through. Snowflakes fell on the baby's bare skin, as if the world itself were trying to bury her. There were no adults, no footsteps, no cars, just Rag, and the thin, fading cry slicing through his scarred heart like a knife. At that moment, no one told Rag what to do. No commands, no memories to guide him. Only something ancient stirred inside, a wordless instinct, a calling. He stepped forward cautiously. The smell of milk, fear, cold, and desperation filled his senses. He touched the baby's tiny hand with his cold nose. She whimpered. He licked her cheek gently like a promise. And then, without hesitation, he gripped the corner of the basket with his teeth and began to pull through snow and through wind, an unnamed dog, an abandoned child, and a winter night on the verge of deciding both their fates. The wind still screamed through the old tin roofs of the train station. Snow blanketed every path Rag kept pulling, teeth locked on the plastic handle, jaws trembling with cold. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know if anyone would come, but stopping was never an option. Ahead lay the interstate, normally buzzing with trucks and buses. Tonight it was nearly silent. The snow was too thick. The storm had cut the town off from the world. But still, Rag pulled forward. The basket was not light, and Rag had almost no strength left. Every tug, every dragging step sent cold splinters through his aching body, as if the frost was cracking him from the inside out. But the baby still lay inside, fragile and motionless. And if he didn't do something, she wouldn't make it through the night. At last, Rag reached the edge of the road. A street lamp flickered overhead, casting a pale glow over the layers of ice beneath his feet. There were no engines, no honking, no voices, only the wind howling, and Rag's ragged breath filled the silence. He leaned in and licked the baby's face again. Her cheek was ice cold. Rag whimpered softly, then turned his head and scanned the empty road. No one. And then... And headlights far in the distance, a pair of lights flickered through the snow. Maybe a truck, maybe a bus slicing through the white veil like the first fragile rays of hope. Rag let out a low growl, then barked. He barked as he never had before, hoarse, and cracked the sound ripping from a throat scorched by cold and exhaustion. Once again, but the vehicle didn't stop. It slowed for a moment. Perhaps the driver saw something along the roadside, but then kept going. The tires hissed as they skimmed the ice. Rag stumbled after it for a few desperate steps, then slipped. Falling into the snow, the taillights faded and disappeared. He returned to the basket, curling his body around it. The weight of disappointment settled over him like fresh snow. The baby still breathed barely. Her tiny body trembled, then grew still. The crying had stopped. Silence, no one was coming. Rag glanced around. He couldn't drag the basket any farther. All his strength had been poured into this journey through the storm. Now there was only darkness ahead and the cold road behind. And so he made a choice. He couldn't do anything more, but he could stay. He lay down over the basket, curling himself around the small, chilled body inside, the way he once had curled up beside the older man on bitter winter nights. Snow gathered on his back. His belly pressed against the plastic, forming a thin barrier between the baby and the death. Creeping in with every breath, he barked again, soft but clear. Then once more his throat burned. His ears twitched at every distant sound. Whenever a light passed in the distance, he forced himself up, barking louder, hoping, pleading, until there was no strength left. Eventually his barks faded into low whines. Time moved like freezing water, thick, sluggish. The night stretched endlessly. Snow piled higher across Rag's back, blanketing him in white, like a grave slowly forming. Still he didn't move. Every sound made his ears flick. Each gust of snow drove him closer to the basket, shielding it tighter. Then, just as the first dull glimmer of dawn broke across the sky, another beam of light cut through the snow. This time, it stopped. A large weathered truck crunched through the snow, coming to a halt just a few dozen feet away. The door swung open and a man stepped out, wrapped in a thick fur coat, his face stinging from the bitter air. He spotted the shape in the snow, a dog barely visible curled tightly around something. The man approached cautiously. "Stray," he muttered, uncertain. But then he heard a faint broken whimper. He saw the plastic basket soak through and the tiny figure barely moving inside. "Oh, dear God," he whispered. Rag lifted his head, eyes wide and heavy, and as if summoning the last ember of hope left in his tired soul, he barked one final time, not fierce, not demanding, just a plea. And this time someone heard it. At the small town hospital, soft white light spilled over a tiny incubator in the neonatal intensive care unit. The baby girl had been placed inside, wrapped in warm blankets. Her cheeks slowly regained their color after hours of careful warming and IV fluids. The nurses gave her a nickname, Snow Baby, for she'd been found in the storm near frozen in an old plastic basket. No one knew her name, no ID, no family. She was simply another abandoned child. And the dog who saved her, Vichy, who had lain over that basket through a night of unrelenting cold, now rested silently in a steel kennel behind the hospital's side building. No one had claimed him. No tags, no medical records, no history. They referred to him simply as Stray. The truck driver had told the story as best he could when he brought them in. It was logged in the hospital report. A few local reporters stopped by for photos, but the story didn't explode. It didn't go viral. There were no headlines, no hashtags to the world. It was just another strange event in a winter storm. To the hospital, it was just an anonymous infant and a dog who needed to be quarantined. But for Clara Jensen, the head nurse who had worked at the hospital for over 20 years, the story struck something deeper than most could see. Her late husband had been a firefighter, a kind, quiet man who gave his life during a building collapse after a blaze downtown. He had once rescued a little girl he'd never met. Clara often said, "He's gone, but he left something behind, something that mattered." And now, as she stood before the kennel where the dog lay quietly, eyes vacant but not angry, she saw that same gaze, the gaze of someone who gave everything without expecting anything in return. No one came forward to adopt him. The veterinary staff mentioned he could be transferred to the city's animal control facility, a place that held strays with no owners until their time ran out. Clara had nodded politely when she heard it. But that night during the late shift, she returned with a thick blanket and a tray of warm food. She stood in front of the metal cage and whispered, "I don't know who left you behind, but you didn't leave her, so I won't leave you either." The next day, Clara filled out a request to foster the dog temporarily. No one objected. In a town like theirs, things were often settled with quiet trust more than paperwork. The baby girl, still unnamed, gradually recovered over the course of a week. Doctors later said, if she had been found just an hour later, she wouldn't have survived. They gave her a name, Hope. The dog, once a nameless stray, was now called Bruno, named after a fictional character from a children's book Clara's husband used to read aloud at the town library. At first, Bruno kept his distance. He didn't bark. He didn't wag. He didn't react to toys or voices. But every time Clara opened the kennel door, he didn't run. He just stood still as if waiting, not for permission, but for a reason to believe again. When Clara finally brought Hope home to a small, quiet house at the end of a cobbled lane, she brought Bruno with them, two souls no one had waited for. Now they stepped into a house that hadn't heard laughter in a long, long time. Life for the three of them began gently. Hope slept in Clara's daughter's old crib. Bruno curled beneath it, at first out of habit, perhaps. But each time Hope cried in the night, Bruno would rise, sniff at her with concern, and let out a low, comforting whine. Slowly over the time, Hope would calm down whenever she felt his nose brush her tiny fingers. Clara didn't force the bond between them. She simply cooked, sang lullabies, and cared. And then piece by piece, the house began to fill with sound again. The soft giggles of a child, the light tapping of Bruno's paws across wooden floors, the hushed whispers. Clara spoke to two beings who could not reply but understood more than most ever would. One day someone asked Clara, "Why a child with no known family and a stray dog?" She smiled and said, "Because neither of them asked to be abandoned, but they were given to me, and that felt like purpose." Bruno never became famous. There were no headlines, no interviews. But to Clara, he was a silent guardian. To Hope, he was the soft pillow. The first friend, the constant shadow. One early spring morning, Clara opened the back door to let in the warm sun. She watched from the kitchen as Hope played on the grass, wobbling in her little steps. She tripped, and Bruno, gentle and watchful, moved to her side, bracing her head softly with his back so she wouldn't hit the ground. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Not from sadness, but peace, because she realized something quietly and completely. Family doesn't begin with blood. It begins with a choice to stay when someone needs you most. And Bruno, the nameless dog once found near the landfill, had made that choice on a winter night, and every day since the summer Hope turned 4, the little town bathed in golden light. The Central Park buzzed with life. Children laughed, dogs barked, and Clara, now retired, sat beneath a leafy tree, reading a worn paperback. Hope was nearby, tossing a red ball across the grass. Bruno, now older, moved slower than before. His fur had dulled, his back had started to arch, but his eyes, still sharp, still soft, never strayed from Hope. "Don't go too far," Clara called out, eyes still on her book. Hope giggled and threw the ball toward the edge of the park near the fence that bordered an old building under renovation. A few minutes later, a sudden explosion rang out from the direction of the building. Smoke burst skyward, thick, dark, and fast. Shouts followed, glass shattered. And then the wind shifted, sending waves of smoke spilling toward the park. Hope. Clara leaped up, heart pounding. Panic erupted. Children scattered. Parents called out, and people rushed to safety. But Hope, too young to understand, stood frozen in place, trapped near the fence. Bruno saw her first. He didn't bark. He didn't hesitate. He charged through the smoke, weaving through the chaos, paws pounding the grass, tail, low eyes locked on her. Hope standing small and terrified, tears brimming. Bruno moved closer, gently, biting the cuff of the girl's sleeve and tugging. Not hard, not to hurt, just enough for her to follow. Hope saw him, recognized him instantly, and clung to him, crying out Bruno, As the smoke began to sting her eyes, Clara reached the edge of the fence, just in time to see Bruno pulling Hope out of the smoky chaos. He paused for a moment, his legs tired, body heavy, but he pushed forward, with his shoulder against her side. He guided her through a gap in the dispersing crowd. Hope fell into Clara's arms. "Mommy, Bruno saved me." Bruno collapsed onto the grass, panting hard. His nose was still black, but soot had scorched patches of his fur. He gasped for air, but his eyes never left. Hope. Clara held her daughter close, then turned to the dog, her companion, her family's quiet hero, and wept. That moment, one that could have been forgotten, was captured in full by a nearby security camera. 2 days later, the footage surfaced on a local news site with the headline, "Old Dog Rushes into Smoke to Save 4-Year-Old Girl at Park." Within 24 hours, the story spread across the country. Social media dubbed him the silent symbol of hope. News outlets gave him a new name, Bruno. The dog with the gentle heart. TV stations reached out for interviews, but Clara declined most except for one small ceremony organized at Town Hall. On the day of the medal ceremony, the hall was packed. Rows of chairs lined the space, all eyes drawn to the small wooden stage lit by soft yellow lights. Clara sat in the front row, Hope by her side in a white dress, her curly hair pinned back neatly, holding a small folded piece of paper in her hands. Bruno, freshly groomed, a pale blue ribbon tied gently around his neck, lay at Hope's feet. He didn't understand the crowd, but he wasn't afraid. He simply rested his head on her shoe, just like always. When it was her turn, Hope was gently guided to the stage. She stood at the microphone, silent for a moment. Then in a small but clear voice, she read the words she'd practiced. The night before, that day, the smoke was thick, and I didn't know what to do, but Bruno didn't leave me. He pulled me out of there, and I think he's been doing that for a long time, not just saving me. He taught me how to love, how to care for others. He never talks, but he always understands, and I love him. Below, Clara quietly wiped away a tear. When Hope finished, the entire hall stood and applauded, not for a dramatic act of heroism, but for the quiet loyalty and unconditional love of a dog no one had once wanted. From that day forward, Bruno remained the same quiet dog, but to the town he had become something more. People came to the park just hoping to take a photo with him. A small bronze statue was placed at the entrance to the town library, engraved with the words, "Bruno, a friend who needed no words to be loved." Hope continued growing up in Clara's warm little home. Bruno still slept at her feet every night, and though his back had bent and his vision faded, he still followed her every time she wandered into the yard. One afternoon, when Hope was sick, she whispered to Clara, "I don't remember who gave birth to me, but I remember who never left me. I remember Bruno," and that Clara knew was what truly mattered. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. If what we've shared today has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll continue to tell stories where love, loyalty, and kindness still live on. Your support means everything to us and gives us the strength to keep spreading the good.